Returning to inside the Philippines, you're already familiar with what we do. Raw accounts, genuine experiences, and the real impact they leave behind. No embellishment, no judgment, just the facts, so you might walk away with a clearer perspective than the person at the heart of the tale. This episode features Brendan, a 63-year-old former electrician from County Limerick on Ireland's western coast. After 38 years in the trade, he's now sharing his story. A person who, by his own account, spent his entire career avoiding attention and never once created trouble for others. Remember that fact. This story isn't about a love scam, a nightlife hustle, or a staged crisis. It's about something far more subtle and far more insidious than any of those. And it's the kind of thing almost no one considers before boarding a flight to the Philippines. Brendan will walk you through a single instant, one unremarkable flash of irritation, the sort any of us could experience after a rough day, the kind that back home would vanish the second you stepped inside. The experience in the Philippines took an unexpected turn. What unfolded in the hours and days that followed is the sort of account every traveler should hear before setting foot in Cebu, Manila, or any other part of this island nation. He wanted his story told because he believes more people ought to be aware. After listening, I can't disagree. This is one you won't forget. Here's Brendan speaking for himself. I'm Brendan, originally from Limerick. Not the affluent side, but not the rough side either. Just the typical Limerick, the way most of it is. Everyday roads, plain homes, the usual routine. For 38 years, I worked as an electrician, mostly commercial and industrial jobs. Factories, storage units, the occasional hospital project. A good chunk of my time was spent on sites near Shannon and across Munster. I wasn't the kind of spark who drew attention, but I got the job done. Dependability was my strength. If a foreman called at dawn because a circuit had blown and no one could track down the issue, I'd show up. And I'd fix it. I took that step myself. I left work at 61. The union pension from Cebu provides a steady income, nothing extravagant but reliable. It handles the essentials and leaves a little extra. On top of that, I'd put money aside over the years, close to 38 of them, working extra hours and avoiding unnecessary expenses. Golf never appealed to me, and I've never been much of a drinker. By then, the children's education was mostly covered through their mother's arrangements. The savings had grown steadily over time, unnoticed almost. That's how it goes when you don't keep close track. Not that there was anything wrong with it. Things were good. The place was in Castle Troy, just outside the city limits. A 3-bedroom house, picked up in the 90s, and fully paid for by 2011. The yard was decent, and the neighbors on both sides were solid. Guys I'd nod to now, and then, sometimes lending a hand with an electrical issue. Christie's neighbor has a faulty heating cabinet that's been a safety risk since 2019, and I've repeatedly mentioned it to him. His children, there are 3, have all moved away. One son lives in Vancouver, another daughter is in Melbourne, and the youngest, who initially settled in Toronto, later relocated to a small town near Calgary. The name escapes me, though he once shared a location link. I kept it, but would need to check to recall exactly where it is. I'm not resentful, just to be clear. I brought them up to be independent, and they've done just that. That's the point of parenting, isn't it? You don't bring up kids to keep them close. You raise them to go, and when they do, you're mostly glad. Only now and then, late at night when everything's still, you wonder, so this is how it is now. This is what comes next. I wasn't miserable. I don't think I was. It was more that I'd spent 4 decades being essential. On job sites, to foremen, to apprentices who couldn't make sense of a wiring diagram if their lives depended on it. Then, one October Tuesday in 2022, I turned in my tools, and suddenly, no one needed me for anything. That hit different than I'd imagined. Mornings, I'd head out for the paper, come back, flip through it, check the garden, stream something, cook, watch a little more, then sleep. 11 days, that's the longest stretch without a single call to the house. I didn't track it at the time, not like some countdown in my head. I just realized later, when UEFA finally rang on a Sunday afternoon, that I'd been keeping score without meaning to. I wasn't down about it. I just had no one relying on me, so I started figuring out what to do with the rest of my life. Seems fair enough. Plenty of men do the same. I dove into YouTube the way I used to study manuals, methodically, notebook in hand, rewinding anything I didn't fully grasp. And no, not the sappy stuff. That's important, because it shaped how I saw myself back then. I spent hours researching living expenses, medical care, visa regulations, and expat message boards, where men of my generation debated whether their retirement funds would last. I put together a spreadsheet comparing Thailand, Vietnam, the Philippines, Portugal, and Mexico. The columns represented the countries, while the rows tracked weather, healthcare quality, English literacy, the rent for a one-bedroom flat, and visa options for retirees over 60. Ultimately, the Philippines emerged as the clear winner for 3 candid reasons. First, English is widely spoken there, which is essential when you're 63 and have no intention of mastering a new language. Second, it's a Catholic nation. I'm not religious and haven't been to church in ages, but there's a certain comfort in living somewhere that shares the same cultural values and ethical foundation you grew up with. Lastly, the local expenses fit my monthly pension perfectly, meaning I wouldn't have to dip into my savings. This allowed me to treat the journey as a trial run rather than a permanent commitment. That's how I rationalized it. Just a quick scouting trip. 3 weeks, with a return ticket already in hand. I told my neighbor Christy I was heading out for a short while. The Philippines, he noted. The Philippines? What exactly awaits me there? I don't know yet, and that's the point. I'd reserved a room in Lahug, a quiet part of Cebu City, far from the resorts and rowdy hostels. It was a simple guest house, managed by a man named Rodrigo, who asked for 900 pesos a night, around 16 euros, for a tidy room with a fan, then left me to myself. That was all I needed. I landed in February, and the heat struck before I even cleared customs. A heavy, damp warmth, unlike anything back in Limerick. Something so distinct it fades from notice after 4 days, but becomes oddly necessary by the 10th. The airport buzzed with energy, voices overlapping in multiple conversations at once. Standing there with my bag, I thought, well, here I am. A tricycle took me to the guest house. The driver quoted 150 pesos, but I handed him 200. His surprise was brief. That first evening, I ate at a carinderia, a no-frills local eatery, rice and an unidentifiable but satisfying broth for 40 pesos, less than €1. That night, I slept deeper than I had in months, though I couldn't say why. The heat, perhaps, or the noise. Karaoke drifting from a nearby street, a dog barking, the hum of a tricycle engine. Maybe it was simply being somewhere no one knew my name or expected anything from me. After a week, I decided to stay another. Nothing had occurred to prompt it, nothing at all. I simply wasn't prepared to start tallying time again. By the second week, I fell into the rhythm I adopt wherever I land. Up before dawn, the roosters making sleep impossible past 7, and after a few mornings, you stop fighting it. A short walk down to the bakery on the corner below Rodrigo's apartment, where a pan de sal and coffee in a plastic cup cost around 20 pesos total. I'd take a seat outside, watching the neighborhood stir. Solitude has never bothered me. Years of tracking down wiring issues in deserted buildings teach you to be at peace with quiet. Cebu City isn't quiet, not really, it never is. But in the constant hum, you carve out your own space. No one pays you any mind. You'd never guess you're a former electrician from Limerick, your kids long gone abroad, your home now too quiet. To everyone else, you're just another person with a cup of coffee. There was an unexpected calm in that. During my second week, I spent a lot of time walking through the tech park, all sleek glass and cafes filled with young professionals hunched over screens, then down Colon Street, said to be the oldest in the Philippines. It certainly felt that way, packed and bustling, thick with the scent of fish, exhaust, and an oddly sweet aroma I couldn't place. I stopped by a hardware store close to Carbon Market one day, just to feel like things were ordinary. The cable gauges had different labels, but the same basic system was there, just like anywhere else. The tourist visa lasts 30 days when you arrive from Ireland, as I'd already learned. You can renew it at the Bureau of Immigration. Each extension runs a few hundred pesos, and you can keep renewing it for quite a while before having to exit and come back. I renewed mine after 2 weeks, paying 3,030 pesos at the BI office on Osmeña Boulevard. A quick stamp, another month approved. Simple, no hassle. Exactly the kind of system I understand. That extension is what gave me time to wander further. Rodrigo mentioned Carcar City one morning when I asked him where was worth seeing outside of Cebu City itself. He said it like it was obvious. Old Spanish church, good chicharron, easy day trip on the South Bus. I wrote it down the following Tuesday. I took a bus from the South Bus Terminal, which cost 52 pesos, and took about an hour south through towns. I couldn't name past rice fields and roadside stalls, selling what looked like entire roasted pigs, past basketball courts. There's a basketball court every few hundred meters in this country. I don't know how they manage it, and arrived in Carcar in the late morning. It's a proper old town heritage buildings from the Spanish period, a big stone church that's been standing since the 1500s, apparently quieter than Cebu City. The heat felt different there, more still. I walked around the church, had a look at the market, bought a bag of the chicharron, which is fried pork skin, and which I ate half of immediately, and then felt mildly guilty about for the rest of the afternoon. And then I heard the brass band. It was coming from a side street I hadn't gone down, and I followed it the way you follow anything interesting when you've nowhere particular to be. It led me to a barangay fiesta, a street party essentially, for a local feast day. Tables and chairs lined the street. Kids darted around everywhere. Women wore their best dresses, and a brass band played something. Maybe a hymn, maybe a pop song. With so much energy, it was impossible to tell. I paused at the edge, hesitant to step in. You don't just walk into a family gathering unannounced, even in a place where it often feels like everyone's welcome. But then a man near my age motioned to an empty plastic chair beside him, as if it had been waiting for me, and within moments, someone placed a plate in front of me. Rice, grilled meat, a piece of lechon that was incredible. Just like that, I was part of it. I want to capture Renalyn as I truly saw her, not the way stories usually paint people. She wasn't the most striking woman there. The word that fits is poised. She moved between tasks effortlessly, organizing at one table, checking on older relatives, translating for a child, all with the quiet competence of someone who's always been the one holding things together. And that's exactly what she was. At some point, she came over to where I sat, the practical thing to do when there's a stranger at your family's celebration, lost in the noise. Her English was clear and straightforward. She told me whose fiesta it was, explained the feast day, mentioned the lahan had been roasting since morning. She answered my questions but didn't pry with her own. Not many, anyway. That was the thing about her. After spending 2 weeks in Cebu City, I'd grown familiar with the typical rhythm of small talk. The same questions came up every time. Where do you live? What's your job? Any spouse or kids? How much longer will you be here? Polite, sure, but the pattern always felt like ticking boxes on a checklist. Renalyn, though, didn't follow that script. Instead, we ended up discussing the booking fan. This could have been me in that ring. Drop a comment if you've ever been in a fight you instantly regretted. Church's design, and she had real insight to share. She'd worked in accounting for a construction company that had restored a similar building elsewhere, so her thoughts on the stonework weren't just guesses. They were grounded in experience. 34, working as an accountant, someone who lived by numbers, logic, and real-world solutions. Even now, I still wonder what drew me in. It wasn't just interest, or not entirely. There was something deeper, like seeing a reflection of myself in another setting. That quiet understanding felt oddly reassuring, though I wouldn't have known how to put it into words back then. Over the course of the afternoon, We spoke for about 40 minutes in all. She returned to her family multiple times, responding to other questions I'd asked as the afternoon wore on. When I realized the bus back to Cebu City was approaching, I asked for her number without hesitation. I've long since outgrown anything but straightforwardness. She hesitated, thought it over, then handed it to me. She didn't ask for mine in return, and that small detail shaped how I understood the moment. A man conditioned to be wary of women who initiate, who feels relief when they don't, who reads caution as a sign of self-respect. I'm not justifying it. I'm explaining how I saw it then, because honesty demands that much. Not because I'm sure I misread the situation. I'm still not. That uncertainty lingers. We saw each other 2 more times before I left for Cebu City. Once for coffee near the church, then a walk to a hilltop overlook where, on a clear day like that one, you could see the strait between Cebu and Bohol. Nothing physical passed between us, no promises made. Just 2 people moving at a rhythm that felt natural, a pace I hadn't expected, not after all the warnings I'd absorbed. I stayed an extra week. It wasn't exhilaration. The last stretch hadn't left me with that familiar sense of anticipation, something I'd almost forgotten could happen. It struck me as a step forward, though I'm still not sure if that was the right way to see it. Some choices blur too easily. You can't always tell where the sensible ones stop and the ones you should have second-guessed start. Eventually, I returned to Limerick. Her contact was still saved. My laptop held a folder full of research on the SRV visa. And the spreadsheet, once just a safeguard, had quietly turned into something closer to a roadmap. Returning to Limerick, the house struck me as more cramped than I remembered. 6 weeks away, longer than intended, yet not nearly long enough. Stepping back into Castletroy in March was like slipping into an old jacket that no longer sat right. The house, the garden, even Christy next door, everything was exactly as I'd left it. He asked how things had been, accepted my vague reply about the weather, and disappeared inside. The sameness of it all was unsettling. Meanwhile, Renalyn and I had already resumed our WhatsApp conversations the day after I got back. It wasn't part of our original plan. She messaged to ask if I'd gotten home okay. I answered, she answered back, and before long, it had turned into one of those exchanges that keeps going when the timing's right, and neither of you steps away. Not marathon conversations, just regular ones. She'd fill me in on her day, a spreadsheet that refused to add up, a contractor dragging his feet on paperwork. I'd tell her I'd finally fixed Christie's temperamental water heater, a 3-hour ordeal involving wiring I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. Neither of us was putting on a show. That's what stuck with me. No posturing, no trying to impress. Just the kind of updates you share with someone who's slipped into your everyday rhythm. I know how that must come across. I know how easy it is for a man to mistake familiarity for something more, without realizing he's doing it. And I won't claim I saw everything with perfect clarity. I didn't. By the 3rd week, she mentioned her father. No fanfare, no grand reveal, just the way things surface when you've been talking every day. Naturally, in passing. She was exhausted, she mentioned. Her father had undergone 2 dialysis treatments that week, and the private facility was pressing for the unpaid fees. She wasn't making any requests, just voicing her fatigue. That night, I checked the numbers. A single session at a private clinic in the Philippines ran between 3,000 and 4,000 pesos, with treatments needed twice a week. That's between 24,000 pesos and 32,000 pesos a month. Call it 420 euros to 550 euros. I'd spent more than that on materials for a single job in my last year of work and thought nothing of it. I offered the next day. She said, no, that wasn't. She didn't want that. I said, I wanted to help, that I could manage it, that it was a practical problem with a practical solution, and I was in a position to provide the solution. She said she'd talked to her mother. She came back the following evening and said they would accept it with gratitude, and that her father would be embarrassed, but she'd tell him only that a friend had helped 30,000 pesos a month, just under 500 euros. I set up the Remitly transfer, and that was that. I made a folder on my phone, named it Medical, Father, saved the first receipt in it. I want to pause here for a second, because I know what you're thinking. And I thought some of it too. I wasn't completely without awareness. But I'll tell you what I also thought. I thought the amounts were real. They truly were in need. I believed the situation was real. And it was. Her father was undergoing dialysis, something I'd witnessed firsthand 2 months later. The sight of him in that car clinic, seated in a chair, appearing far older than his years, the tubes, the machine, the quiet resignation of someone who had grown accustomed to a life of relentless discomfort. It was undeniable. That authenticity, I feel, is essential to any truthful telling of this story. By May, I had returned to Cebu, spending another 6 weeks in the same La Hague guest house. Rodrigo assigned me the same room again, which I was grateful for. The ceiling fan still clattered at the second speed setting. By the third day, I finally got to know the family properly. Renilin's mother, Ligaya, a retired educator, was petite, meticulous, and so courteous it made you want to mind your manners. Her husband, Danilo, was there too. They had 2 younger sons, Roni, who worked night shifts at a Cebu City BPO, handling customer service calls, and a college-aged brother. Their daughter, Lani, lived with them along with her 2 young children. Her husband worked on a fishing vessel out of Mactan and was rarely home. The house sat a 40-minute tricycle ride from Karkar's center, a 2-story concrete structure with the upper floor left half-built. Like many Filipino homes, its rooftop studded with exposed rebar where construction had stalled when funds dried up. The paint was weathered, but the yard was immaculately swept. Attached to the side was a modest sari-sari store, a tiny room with a counter window selling single-use shampoo packets, instant noodles, and chilled drinks from a buzzing refrigerator. Ligaya managed it, and nothing about the place felt artificial. Having spent my life around construction sites, I could tell the difference between a home with delayed upkeep and one staged for show. This was the real deal, a family's house with real struggles. The roof over the back patio had a section corroding through, and the water damage beneath suggested it had been leaking for at least a couple of rainy seasons. I noticed it during my second visit, but didn't say anything at first. Then, one afternoon, Roni came home looking shaken. He sat down and told his mother something in Cebuano that made her expression tighten with quiet concern. Renilin later explained the BPO company had lost a contract, and Roni, along with 40 others, had been laid off. His share of the rent for a room near the call center district, 9,000 pesos a month, was due in 2 weeks. I covered 2 months' worth, 18,000 pesos each time, roughly 310 euros. A few days before my flight home, the roof issue resurfaced. I'd been eyeing it every time I stepped into the yard, and the leak had clearly worsened. Renilin mentioned they'd been setting aside money for repairs but kept having to redirect it for other needs. I took a quick look at what it would take, a simple patch job replacing a small section of corrugated metal. Materials and labor were covered in the 55,000 peso cost, around 950 euros, which I had already paid before departing. The project involved the house and its roof. A month after returning to Limerick, a WhatsApp message came through, a photo of an enrollment form from a school. Lani's oldest child, a 7-year-old girl, was beginning 2nd grade at a private institution after the closest public school halted operations due to structural issues. The term's tuition came to 22,000 pesos, roughly 380 euros. I sent the funds that very day. It was for schooling, Lani's child. I find myself drawn to that file again and again. The structure I gave it, how I organized it, the tidy sections, the receipts filed in date order. Looking back, I realized the folder served a purpose beyond record-keeping. It turned the whole process into something methodical, almost businesslike, like overseeing a home renovation instead of questioning whether I was truly at ease with the full amount. By the time I scheduled my 3rd trip to Cebu, the entries had grown to about 625,000 pesos, around 10,800 euros, over 4 months. Every expense, on its own, seemed perfectly justified. The reality of dialysis hit hard. So did losing my job. The rent was due, and school expenses loomed. Beneath it all lingered a question I hadn't fully put into words. One of those unsettling, half-formed thoughts that feel the most dangerous. This third trip felt different from the moment I left, though I avoided asking myself why. For the first time, I booked a one-way ticket. I told myself it was practical. Open-ended travel meant flexibility, and flexibility made sense now that I was seriously looking into the SURV, the Special Resident Retiree's Visa. That visa would let me stay in the Philippines without the hassle of constantly renewing a tourist stamp. The SURV requires a 20,000 deposit with the Philippine Retirement Authority. It's a real deposit, not a fee. You get the money back when you leave. Yet it lingered as a sort of unspoken promise. An inquiry I'd made with the PRA office. Nothing finalized, though the spreadsheet now had a fresh tab. My connection with Renalyn had grown in ways neither of us had voiced outright. I'd met her friends, been welcomed at her workplace, a modest construction firm in Karkar, tucked off the main road in a single-story building with a hand-painted sign, and a guard who greeted me each morning as if I belonged. Her co-workers were warm but discreet, never prying. I liked that. I joined her family for Sunday Mass, not because anyone insisted, but because it was Sunday, they were going, and I was there, so it felt natural. That service stayed with me in ways I hadn't expected. The church in Karkar is centuries old, its stone floors and lofty ceilings holding the weight of time, a single fan stirring the air without offering relief. The entire service unfolded in Cebuano, and for most of an hour, I grasped nothing. Still, I can't explain it without making it sound more profound than I mean to. The sense of comfort I experienced was one I hadn't known in a place of worship since childhood. The entire ceremony served as the familiar setting of being with loved ones. Nothing spiritual, really. Just the outline of something I understood. Ligaya must have noticed I'd come unprompted, because later, Renalyn relayed that her mother had expressed happiness. I turned that over in my mind on the ride home. Happiness, not expectation, not strategy. The issue with her tooth surfaced around the third week. Renalyn had been dealing with a persistent molar for months, relying on painkillers to get by, like so many do when the cost of treatment feels out of reach. She brought it up casually over breakfast at a small eatery near her workplace, the same simple meal of garlic rice and eggs I'd grown used to by then. When I asked what it would take to address it properly, she admitted she wasn't sure. I told her to look into it. They quoted me 35,000 pesos, around 600 euros for the tooth extraction and a partial denture. I sent the money that very evening, but I didn't open my phone's app to record it. Smash that like button if you're learning something new today, because trust me, you don't want to learn this the hard way. I planned to, but I just never got around to it. I still dwell on that, the fact that I didn't log it. Every other payment had been immediately documented in a folder, the category, the amount, the date, and the receipt if there was one. I left this one out, not on purpose. The part of my mind that usually keeps track had begun to ease up slightly. I couldn't pinpoint when or why it happened. All I knew was that I only realized it was missing a week later and recorded it then. By that point, the folder's balance had climbed to 780,000 pesos, roughly 13,500 euros. Not a trivial amount, but not devastating either. Enough that I would have caught it if I'd been as vigilant as I was at first. There was this guy I ran into at a cafe near IT Park. A British guy, I think from somewhere in the Midlands, though the exact town escapes me now. He'd lived in Cebu for 4 years. He mentioned it the way expats do, straightforward, no build-up. Because in those circles, everyone's more or less the same type, drawn to the same places for similar reasons, and the conversation flows in familiar shorthand. We spoke for about an hour. He was good company. At one point he asked, casually, without pressure, how long I'd been wiring money. I dodged the question, said we were still settling in, that things were messy. He nodded, didn't press, but then he gave me that look, the one I've given before, years back, to guys who'd moved funds in a way that wasn't outright wrong, but wasn't quite clean, and were about to learn the hard way. It wasn't disapproval, just the look of someone who recognizes the situation and weighs whether to speak up. He chose not to. We finished our drinks and parted ways. I convinced myself he was just another man who'd grown bitter over time. You encounter them in communities of foreigners, men who've been scorched once and now flinch at every spark, unable to accept that others might live differently. It's a common pattern among those living abroad. I accepted this view back then, mostly anyway, but I still find myself replaying his expression, more often than I'd admit. 2 nights later, Renelin and I ate at a modest eatery near the historic church, a place run by a local family that served passable grilled fish and chilled San Miguel. The evening unfolded without fuss. She described a tangled work project. I rambled about nothing in particular. At some point, the church bells chimed. We paid 480 pesos for our meal and strolled back toward the guest house under the dim light of a flickering convenience store and the blue glow of a neighbor's TV, spilling from an open window. For the first time in ages, I felt at ease. The realization that struck me on that walk was simple. This could actually last. I could picture a life here that didn't feel forced. The next night, we went out again. Same route, different spot. A scooter cut across our 3-wheeler on the ride back. I should be honest about what really took place. When recounting something like this, there's always the urge to exaggerate, to make the moment seem more intense, more obviously someone else's mistake. But the reality is far plainer and far more awkward. We were in a tricycle, returning from a meal at a small eatery called Tita's, a family-run spot just off the main road in Karkar we'd visited a couple of times before. By the second trip, the owner already knew our usual orders and served them without a word. Pork adobo for me, grilled bangus for Renelin, along with 2 chilled bottles of Royal since they didn't carry San Miguel. It was a Tuesday. Nothing was wrong. The tricycle was moving at maybe 30 kilometers an hour when a motorbike came across the intersection without slowing. Not recklessly exactly. He'd looked. He'd judged the gap. He'd made a decision that turned out to be tighter than he'd calculated. The tricycle driver braked. I lurched forward and grabbed the side rail. The adrenaline was immediate. That spike you get when something almost happens. The kind I hadn't felt since a loose piece of conduit fell from a second-floor gantry and missed me by about a foot on a job in Shannon in 2004. Same spike old response. I said something, not a threat, frustration, the kind you'd express at an inanimate object. A stubborn bolt, a cable tray that won't line up, just a sharp noise in the direction of the inconvenience. The motorbike driver had slowed by then and was looking back at us. He said something in Cebuano. I didn't understand the words, but I understood the tone, which was not apologetic, and I raised my voice, not at length. 4 or 5 words in English, none of them particularly imaginative, the kind of thing that on a site in Limerick would have dissolved in the air before anyone had time to register it. I'm 63 years old, and I'd managed 38 years on building sites, which are not quiet environments, without ever once being in genuine trouble with anyone. The distinction between an outburst and an actual disturbance was clear to me. This was the latter. The motorcycle halted, and 2 men emerged from a rundown shop on the corner. I couldn't tell if they'd witnessed the close call or simply caught the shouting. A third man materialized from somewhere unseen, and then one of them pulled out a phone. I noticed the camera the way you notice a shift in the air. Subtle, but under the right circumstances it could change everything. After enough time in the Philippines, I'd learned that being recorded during a conflict was never just a neutral act. I raised both hands, kept quiet, and told Renelin we should leave. We did, and no one tried to stop us. We made our way back to the guest house, and I assumed that was the end of it. It wasn't. An hour and a half later, there was a knock at the door. 2 local officials stood at the entrance, their manner respectful yet official. A report had been made. Would I accompany them to the Karkar precinct? The request left little room for refusal. Once there, I waited on an uncomfortable plastic seat, catching only fragments of the conversation swirling around me. Renelin moved through the room, exchanging rapid words with different people, her expression tight with a quiet strain I hadn't witnessed before. Not fear exactly, but the kind of focused restraint someone shows when handling an unwanted crisis. And in truth, that's precisely what this was. The accusation fell under Article 282 of the Revised Penal Code, serious threats. I searched for the details on my phone while perched on the hard plastic seat. The relevant statute applies to anyone who makes a criminal threat against another person. According to the paperwork, my outburst had qualified. To be truthful, I found the whole thing ridiculous. Even now, I believe the intent behind it was overblown. But intent doesn't determine whether a complaint gets filed, and once it's filed, it's not something you can ignore. Then a lawyer showed up. Renolin's cousin had contacted him, and he arrived at the station in under an hour, which struck me as unusually fast. He was young, sharply dressed, and carried himself with confidence. He knew precisely who to approach and how to present the case in the most effective way. Polite, professional. I shook his hand, took note of how quickly he'd gotten there, and kept my thoughts to myself. He laid out the facts in a way that was concise and methodical, something I usually appreciate, even when the news isn't what you want to hear. The report was submitted, and since the charge was bailable, I wouldn't be held in custody. However, what weighed on me for the next several days was the automatic legal procedure that follows. Once a criminal case is filed, the court may ask immigration authorities to impose a travel restriction on a foreigner until the matter is resolved. With that restriction active, leaving the country would be impossible. My visa was still valid, but overstay penalties, 500 pesos daily after the grace period, would start adding up. If the case followed the usual court timeline, it could drag on for months. I tried to process that. Stuck in a country where I had no legal right to stay, on a short-term visa, with time running out and no way to depart. Then he mentioned another option. The motorbike rider, the person who filed the complaint, was willing to sign an affidavit of desistance, a formal document where the complainant retracts the accusation. This is a standard legal tool in the Philippines for settling minor conflicts between individuals. It's a common practice. The sum in question totaled 60,000 pesos, approximately 1,040 euros. The attorney's advance charge for handling the procedure came to 45,000 pesos, or around 780 euros. Returning to my lodging, I spent the next 4 hours on my phone, not making a choice, not working, just confirming details. I researched Article 282. I examined the immigration hold process. I searched for affidavits of desistance, scanning legal aid sites, law school breakdowns, and forum threads from other foreigners who'd faced comparable circumstances across different Philippine cities. The affidavit was legitimate. The immigration hold was legitimate. The steps the lawyer outlined matched the official procedure. That was the most disorienting aspect. Not that anything unlawful was happening, because nothing unlawful was happening. The system simply operated in ways I hadn't anticipated, and I'd failed to understand those differences until it became urgent. That night, sleep came in fragments. The next morning, I was back at the station for more paperwork when one of the family members made an offhand comment in Cebuano that struck me as strange. I watched Renolin's expression. The motorcycle driver, as it turned out, was a blood relative of the opposing side in a 2-year land dispute involving Renolin's family, a conflict I'd been completely unaware of. No one had ever mentioned it. Was it possible? Could someone I'd never met just happen to be the cousin of an adversary tied to the family I'd been entangled with for months? Could the whole situation be purely coincidental? It was possible. I've turned it over in my mind many times since, and still have no explanation that feels right. I paid the lawyer's fee. The payment was settled. I covered 3,000 pesos in random station fees I couldn't quite grasp and didn't have the will to challenge. 4 days after the tricycle, the motorcycle, and the handful of words I muttered into the shadowy chaos of a busy road, I sat in a grab car headed to Mactan Cebu Airport, my bag resting on my knees. Renolin showed up to say goodbye. We lingered near the departure doors, and she wept, softly, the way she always did. No theatrics. Just real emotion, or at least what seemed real. I've come to terms with the fact that I may never be entirely sure. I might never know for certain. For 40 years, I worked quietly, never causing trouble. Then, in a single moment, In a place where I didn't understand the language, I became just another file in the system. I didn't say it aloud, but the thought crossed my mind as I stood in the departure line, watching a family unpack their balikbayan boxes while a child spoke in Cebuano. The air conditioning was a sharp contrast to the heat outside. Later, back in Castle Troy, I did what I always do when things go wrong. I turned to the numbers. It's not that I'm unfeeling. It's just how I make sense of things. On the job, when something breaks, a circuit that overloads, a miscalculation, you don't waste time dwelling on it. You retrace your steps, pinpoint the mistake, and learn from it so it doesn't happen again. This is how it works. This is how it always goes. I pulled up the folder on my phone and scrolled through the numbers. 6 months of dialysis payments, totaling 180,000 pesos from 30,000 each time. 2 months of Roni's rent at 18,000 pesos, adding up to 36,000. Roof repairs came to 55,000. School fees for Lani's daughter, 22,000. Renolin's dental work, 35,000. Then there were the smaller expenses. Gifts when I returned, a grocery trip with Ligaya one afternoon, a pair of school shoes for one of Lani's children that I grabbed without a second thought. All those miscellaneous costs, logged as incidentals, piled up to 452,000 pesos. Legal fees, 45,000. The settlement, 60,000. The grand total, 885,000 pesos, roughly 15,800 euros. I have the money. I want to be perfectly clear about that. I still have it. The pension keeps coming. The house in Castle Troy is still there. And Christie's hot press remains a fire waiting to happen. I'm not broken. I'm just a man who spent 15,800 euros on a lesson that could have been mine for free if I'd bothered to read the right online discussions before boarding that flight. The financial side is straightforward. The other losses? Subscribe now, and who knows, maybe I'll fly one of you out here to train, or at least talk you out of throwing that first punch. Not so easy to tally. Take Renolin. I've thought about this a lot. She's not a monster. I've turned it over enough times that I think I know what I actually believe, and that's it. She's not a villain. The dialysis was real. Her father is still on dialysis. The family obligations she carried were not invented to extract money from a naive Kano. That's not how that family works. That's how that culture works, in the Philippines. And I understand this better now than I did the eldest daughter. Of a family like hers doesn't choose whether to support her parents. She just does. It's not manipulation, it's structure. It's the same as the fact that they go to Mass every Sunday. It's not calculated. It's just how things are arranged. I think she liked me. I think that's genuine. I also think she needed me in a way that was never going to be symmetric, and that neither of us said that out loud. And that's on both of us. The lawyer. I'm less charitable about the 40-minute arrival time, the specific knowledge of which clerk to approach, and how to frame the paperwork, the friendly, efficient certainty of it all. I'm not saying it was organized. I genuinely don't know whether it was organized. I'm saying it could have been, and I have no way to establish which it was. And that uncertainty is its own kind of education, the kind that costs you sleep. Now, if you're watching this because you're planning a trip, or you're already there, I want to tell you the specific things I wish I'd known, not as a lecture, just as the items I'd have put in the folder, if the folder had been about this instead of about medical receipts. A verbal altercation in public in the Philippines is a documentable legal event, back home in Limerick, in London, in Sydney, wherever you're from. Raising your voice at someone in a street is raising your voice. It dissolves. Nobody fills out a form. In the Philippines, a complaint can be filed at a barangay level, with minimal evidence and minimal barrier. The bar is low. The process it triggers is not. A tourist visa is not a safety net. A visa struck me as a form of official authorization. I was lawful. I followed the rules. I was a valid traveler. What I failed to grasp is that a criminal charge turns you into an accused party. And accused parties don't just exit the country while legal proceedings are underway. The Bureau of Immigration's detention authority is an actual process, not an abstract concept. It can be enforced against anyone, no matter their visa type or how meticulously they've complied. Always monitor your visa status and recognize the real-world consequences of overstaying if unforeseen circumstances postpone your departure. Secure legal representation early, not just someone a relative recommends. A legal professional with no ties to your circumstances isn't something you'll find through biased recommendations. Search the web for expat communities and message boards. Reach out to people who've lived there long-term and ask which attorneys they trust. Have a contact ready in your phone well before you need one. The lawyer I hired seemed competent enough, but I never knew whose interests he truly represented. That's the real concern. And the affidavit of desistance. Make sure you understand exactly what it entails. It isn't fraud or deception. It's an established and lawful process within the Philippine legal system for settling minor conflicts. Once a plaintiff agrees to it, the claim is dismissed. This approach frequently resolves minor legal matters. The compensation is open to discussion. In my situation, it was 60,000 pesos, though you might secure a better deal under less urgent conditions. The key takeaway is to be aware of this option and have a general idea of its typical cost. If you find yourself in a scenario where the topic comes up, you'll want to grasp what's being said before hearing it in a late-night police interview. I still exchange messages with Renalyn now and then. Neither of us has brought up the past head-on, not the full financial details, the property conflict, or the lawyer's questionable timing. It's possible we never will. I don't feel compelled to press her for answers, and she hasn't asked me to make sense of it all. The silence lingers between us, heavy like all the things left unsaid. I keep thinking of returning. I genuinely do. The spreadsheet hasn't left my phone. I've even added another section labeled Notes, though it's less about observations and more a collection of mistakes I should have caught before working on anything real. That's the electrician in me talking. You don't walk away from a live wire just because it stung you. You track down the problem. You recognize where things went off track, then correct the approach. We appreciate Brendan sharing his experience with us. It requires courage to recount events so candidly, and we're thankful he chose to do so. At Inside the Philippines, we encounter many accounts like his, and many that end far worse. Brendan emerged with his finances secure and a level head, which isn't always the case. What makes his situation stand out isn't a romance scam, a deceitful partner, or a failed investment. It was a fleeting lapse in judgment on a public street, followed by a legal system that interprets that moment in ways he never anticipated. The real focus here is the disconnect between the rules you instinctively rely on and the ones that truly govern where you are. 3 key lessons to remember. Manage your reactions in public as if your liberty hinges on it, because in some places it does. Stay informed about your visa status and grasp what an immigration hold entails before it becomes a reality, and secure independent legal advice before circumstances demand it. A person you selected, not one who simply appeared. The Philippines isn't inherently unsafe. It's a nation with distinct legal traditions and societal norms that may contrast sharply with what many are accustomed to. Rather than avoiding it, this contrast makes preparation essential. If you have an experience worth sharing, something you've encountered here that others could learn from, we welcome your perspective. All comments are reviewed, and if you haven't already, consider subscribing. Join us again soon. 4 months back, I returned home, and as usual, I made sure to stay alert. The garden was overdue for attention, so I took care of it. Then Christie's hot press gave out for good. The heating element burned out, not the wiring, so at least that wasn't my fault. I swapped it out in under 2 hours one afternoon. He handed me a bottle of Jameson as thanks, which I took but likely won't keep. I rarely drink. The house remains just as quiet as before. Nothing's different there. But I'm not sure anymore that quiet is the problem I thought it was. I think the problem was that I didn't know what to do with myself, and I solved that by making a plan. And the plan had a gap in it, the size of a country I didn't understand. I'm working on the gap. The spreadsheet is still on my phone. I haven't deleted it. The Notes tab now has 11 entries. Some of them are practical. Find independent legal representation before you need it. It didn't come from anyone directly involved in the circumstances. I needed to grasp the legal steps, what sets them in motion, and the basics, like what an affidavit of desistance is, how much it usually costs, and why you shouldn't accept the first number someone mentions at a police station. Some of the advice was less useful. One entry simply stated, "You can't impose the rules you've always known on a place where you're an outsider." That seems obvious now, but it wasn't when I was hunched over my phone in a plastic chair in Karkar at midnight, searching for Article 282. Another pointed out that just because you kept notes doesn't mean you were truly paying attention. I've been active on the expat forum since returning, not to wallow in shared misery. I can't stand that. Men swapping stories about their misfortunes like it's some kind of badge of honor. I go there to uncover what I didn't know before, how the legal system actually works from the inside, what the survey process looks like in reality rather than just on paper, and which areas outside Cebu City have their own social dynamics, community structures, and considerations for someone who just wants to live quietly without drawing attention. I've also been studying utang na loob, the concept of a debt of gratitude, the unspoken obligation to repay kindness, more closely. It's woven into every part of Filipino family life, and I walked into a situation shaped by it, without fully understanding its weight. Renalyn wasn't taking advantage of a cultural expectation when she shouldered her family's financial burdens. She was doing what felt most natural in her world. The fact that she used my money is a different issue, and I've tried to keep those two things distinct in my mind. Blurring them would be unfair to her, and more importantly, it would prevent me from understanding what really happened. What really happened is this. I was a man with an empty space in my life, and I went searching for something to fill it. I found people in a genuinely tough spot, helped them, and then one night, I made a mistake in the wrong place. The gap in my preparation became a gap in my freedom, and it took 15,800 to close it. I made decisions at every turn, some sensible, some things I chose to overlook. The truth is straightforward. Renalyn and I still exchange messages, maybe once every week or two, nothing beyond that. Neither of us is entirely sure what remains between us, and I doubt she has any clearer idea than I do. There are things left unspoken, and I'm not convinced we'll ever voice them. That isn't evasion. It's simply recognizing that some questions don't have useful answers. Experience has taught me not to disturb what might unravel something else. I'm going back, though not immediately. First, I want to spend time in another part of the country. I've been considering Dumaguete, a quieter place, more of a university town, with a different rhythm than Cebu City and its surroundings. I want to arrive somewhere without past ties, to rebuild my understanding from the ground up, the way I should have the first time. The return flight will already be booked. I'll have a lawyer's contact saved before I land, someone vetted by people with no connection to my existing circle. I'll stay on top of my visa status, know what an immigration hold entails, how much it costs to resolve, and who to reach out to. I'll remember that a raised voice in one place doesn't carry the same weight as it does elsewhere. I'm 63. I have time, resources, and a pension that arrives reliably on the 15th of every month, without complications. My savings absorbed over 15,000 euros and remained intact, and for the first time in years, there's something I actually need to do. I just want to map out the system before I risk touching anything that's still live. Gratitude to Brendan for sharing this story so openly. Here at Inside the Philippines, we deeply appreciate those who step forward, as it requires a rare honesty to acknowledge one's own role in difficult situations. Brendan did exactly that, unflinchingly. His experience isn't a cautionary tale about the Philippines itself, but a reminder of the risks of entering any country without grasping its legal and social expectations. A heated exchange that might fade without consequence in Limerick, Leeds, or Adelaide could escalate into a prolonged legal ordeal here, leaving you trapped until it's resolved. This isn't about corruption, it's simply how the system operates. Ignorance comes at a steep cost. So if you remember nothing else, keep these 3 things in mind. Control your emotions in public, as if your freedom depends on it, because it might. Know the terms of your visa and what jeopardizes it. and secure trusted legal counsel before you need it. Someone independent, chosen by you, with no divided loyalties. The dynamics in this story are layered, and we've aimed to reflect that complexity. Renalyn isn't a villain. The pressures shaping her actions are systemic, not personal. They're woven into the fabric of life here, not a calculated choice. An international relationship in that environment often comes with responsibilities, much like an overseas worker in Dubai supporting their family back home. This dynamic isn't necessarily exploitative. It's simply important to recognize. If you've experienced something like this, or are preparing for a journey and have concerns, the comment section is open. We review every message. Some of the most valuable discussions on this platform start there, and a few even inspire upcoming content. Consider subscribing if you're new here. Join us again next week, and remember, when navigating life in the Philippines, stay aware of your surroundings.